Well, it's been a while, ladies and gentlemen. It's been almost 2 months now since we've done this for Melee's in M+, but we're finally back because there was all this alpha madness going around. We didn't really have the time to look into things.
Yeah, and then also there's still like Season 4 and people are actually looking into Season 4 and asking a lot of questions like what to main, what to
play,
blah, blah, blah. And we made some predictions prior to, you know, to the Season 4 launching in it, which is coming in like 3 or 4 days.
It's close. It's very close.
From where you're watching this. And things kind of shifted a little bit in Mythic Plus for Melee specs, and that's what we're going to looking at.
A lot,
today.
Man, a lot. Because today is Friday. It's Tier List Fridays. We're looking at Melee's in M+, and boy, do we have surprises for you. Not as many surprises as our Patreon. If you join our Patreon, first of all, you can get a custom cool-looking wallpaper with your main character, and also you get access to a lot of bloopers that we do, plus the Patreon monthly talk, which we get in. We chat about WoW most of the times, but sometimes, you know, people get ideas and feedback for the channel and all of that. They get involved with all of the process and stuff. So listen, we love you.
Yeah, we love you very much, and if you want to support this content and want to see more of it, because we're doing so much coverage on Dragonflight, and of course we're gonna be doing videos for Season 4 as well, hit the link down below, support us with however much you think we're worth, and we will be super grateful for any appreciation.
And support as well. But you know who's not very, very grateful? Arms Warrior,
dude,
man.
Arms Warrior.
We gotta start off with Arms Warrior because we're taking it alphabetically, okay? This is how we roll, right? A little bit of OCD over there, nothing wrong with that. Arms Warrior is like for the big, I mean, the majority of the people, your average Joe, Arms Warrior can do just fine, okay? But now we're looking at like, you know, the end of the season,
creme de la creme.
Creme de la creme, yeah, we're like on the last 100 meters of the run. And when compared to like the number of keys, like the highest level of keys done, you can definitely see some differences in terms of like presence between Arms Warriors and other specs. That being said, you know, Arms Warrior can deal amazing damage, very good cleave, very good burst consistency. It's just a matter of some specs pulling a lot more or being a little bit more efficient on it.
Arms continues to have a lot of burst, and with the tier set and the Bone Grinder, Merciless Bone Grinder conduit, you can actually pull massive AoE damage. But even with all of that, it still comes a little bit short. This has a little bit more trade-offs than Fury, unfortunately, because Fury is getting better and better and better. So that's probably why a lot less people, fewer people are playing Arms, which kind of hasn't seen much change since our last tier list. Right now it's solid.
It's retained a C tier. Yeah, it's retained a C tier, but we have to mention that a lot of the specs that were in C tier last time, you know, kind of like got bumped a little bit. We'll get to it once we arrive at those specs. Moving along to Assassination Rogues.
One that hasn't been bumped as much.
So this is the thing, right? Assassination Rogue kind of dropped off, but there's a clear explanation for this. So last time we did this, it was 2 months ago. We had Assassination in C tier. It was like right at the end of the C tier, right?
Yeah.
And now, since like, okay, we all know about subtlety, but there's also a situation with Outlaw. So I think a lot of the players that played Assassination just because they didn't like sub, but they kind of like Outlaw, kind of moved to Outlaw. So this is why Assassination is going into D tier. Again, we're talking about like from 20 plus, I don't think like the highest key on Assassin, maybe 24.
Actually, I think we just watched a couple of logs where people were doing like 30s and there was like one assassination lost in there. So you could say that Assassination has the potential to push a lot of damage, but it's probably trading off a lot instead of not going like sub or Outlaw in this case.
We always say this, okay? So when we're talking about the biggest keys you can possibly do, you have to be able to be efficient on delivering that damage, both single target, cleave, and AoE, and Assassination does require a bit of a ramp up, let's say, and maintenance, as opposed to other specs that are in S tier. So this is, I'm not thinking that it's necessarily a problem of numbers, because it can deliver high amounts of damage. However, in order to do that, it definitely needs a little bit more time and maintenance as opposed to Outlaw or Sub. So this is why Assassination right now is in D tier. Now, one spec that has retained a great position in the middle of the pack, I would say, enhancement.
Definitely
Shamans.
enhancements, and obviously with the hype of Dragonflight, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more and more enhancement shamans. And it has gone through the grinder for the last couple of expansions, and finally 9.2 and 9.2.5, and now in season 4 coming in close. Enhancement is seeing some really awesome plays, some really high keys that I don't know if I've ever seen. Like, I don't know how Enhancement was in Legion, but at least in the last 3 years, Enhancement hasn't seen as much play and as much performance as it is now.
Oh, yeah.
And it's smack dab in the middle of B tier,
Yep.
where
Still
that's where top dogs are starting to really rock it out in high keys. And obviously, a lot of the power that goes into Enhancement is with the tier set, is with the double legendaries, and it's also with the buffs that has been gotten over the last couple of patches. So it's a good time to be Enhancement, and definitely going forward into the future.
Yeah, I mean, enhancement has seen, you know, I would say the best of its days since the last 4 or 5 years. It hasn't been like at the top of the tiers in M+, but as Flame was mentioning, in the past you wouldn't even like see much play out of it. So retaining a middle of the pack position, really good. Next up on the list, the Feral Druids, one of our personal favorites. Ferals have retained their position as well. They haven't moved up necessarily, but some hierarchies have been made. It's kind of like in front of C tier as it was 2 months ago. Feral still struggles with like consistent AoE damage. The tier set obviously helps a lot with the AoE burst. I mean, you know, the 2 set, you know, reduces the Berserk cooldown, and then the 4 set, when you pop Berserk, you do that massive AoE damage, like as a burst, one-hit wonder. That doesn't really help in terms of like super high keys. Sure, you can talk about like now fortified tyrannical weeks where you can see ferals like really like melt single target like on bosses. Yeah. They can do really well. It's not bad, but it's definitely in need of some big love. We don't know about like too much tuning or changes, big changes coming to all of the specs moving into season 4, but it would be something nice. At least we have you know, some potential updates for Dragonflight, but so far so good. Feral is doing great. I would say like if you're gonna push between 20s and 25s, no problemo. You can hold your own. I've seen Cyber on his stream being top damage all the time, and he's pushing 26s and 27s. So it can be done, right? Now, if your average Joe can do it, you know, 15, 17s, 18, no problemo.
I can confirm Feral is a blast. My second most played spec, as I found out in Mythic.
No shit.
Did the Raider IO cap, and I did set myself as a challenge to do 20s and get in there, and I was able to do really well. And I think Feral does have a spot. It just needs that little bit of oomph to get into, you know, to be like above the average where the B tier is, I would say.
All right, Frost Decay, Flame, take it away.
Well, that's where Frost Decay is actually. Frost Decay has seen, also similar to Enhancement and maybe a little bit more than Enhancement, has seen a resurgence in this patch, both in raids and in dungeons. It's doing particularly amazing. It's one of maybe the harder specs to pull off in Mythic Plus, because you will be wanting, if you want to push the highest of keys, you'll be wanting to play Breath, which is a pain to maintain. It rhymes for a reason. And outside of that, however, because I know a lot of you are interested, you can also push 20s and higher with the Obliteration build, since it slaps so good. Yeah. So nice.
I mean, for Frost Decay is an acquired taste, and the longtime fans can be happy about this. It hasn't always been the case. There was usually like in previous seasons, you will see a lot of Unholy be more present, and especially like in previous expansions. But I think Frost has retained its position as 2 months ago. It has been a solid B tier, like in front of the B tier with Enhancement here. I think
it's ahead of Enhancement.
Well, yeah, now it's in front, but we'll have a couple of other specs that are going to take it in the lead. Regardless, when you're looking at a B tier, you're looking at like super high keys, like 26s, 27s, and all of that. So definitely worth playing again.
Oh yeah, for sure.
For the last 100 miles of the season. I mean, it's all
these. It's good, man. It's good, and it's likely gonna still be good in season 4 as well. So if you're a Frost Decay main and you were wondering whether you should keep the spec or not, I think you're fine. Have fun, play, breathe on all of those mobs, and get those high IOs.
Next up, Fury Warrior.
Fury Warrior.
Which, again, another spec that has been consistent throughout the season. But I think at some point it was in the range of A and S tier. However, since our last list, it was the lead of the B tier, which is still there. This is like the argument.
It's still happening. Although in the grand scheme of things, the specs that were above Fury are kind of like slipping even more ahead of Fury Warrior. And that doesn't say that Fury Warrior was nerfed or is bad or anything like that. Fury Warrior is actually slapping really hard. It has a more straightforward rotation. Maybe it has fewer restrictions and things that can impede your damage profile if you're gonna, put it side to side to arms. And with, enraged regeneration also reducing damage sec and not just providing you heal, Fury Warrior has more and more tools to deal with high and Mythic Plus damage intake and everything with the way the burst works for both Warrior specs, but especially for Fury. Fury is slapping major damage, and I believe even with all the specs that might be ahead of it, it's likely really only outshined by specs like Survival and maybe Windwalker in terms of AoE, maybe even sub, right? So even if Fury Warrior is like top of the B tier, you're gonna rock it if you main a Fury, man.
Yeah, as opposed to arms, again, is that same argument where Fury Warriors have a better time delivering that damage as opposed to arms, where you need to be a little bit more calculated, a little bit more strategic and stuff. Fury Warrior just goes there, super smooth and delivers it, I would say, much faster.
Oh, yeah.
That being said, I would say granted in front of the B tier. Next on the list, Havoc Demon Hunter,
man.
Yes, retaining their position, and I think this is the first spec that goes into A tier.
Yep.
Nothing like, I don't remember if they were ever in S tier. Well, it's strong competition over there, as you will see. But argument still stands, like Havoc Demon Hunters have like consistent damage all around. You cannot really talk about burst with them, but you have this like pressure all the time in big AoE packs, plus the mobility, plus the usefulness. I mean, in some situations, you really make use of that darkness. And you also have to remember Chaos Brand, which is very, very important, especially since if you're looking at the team comps, you're definitely going to see, some mages over there, some warlocks and stuff.
100%.
And they're going to make use of it. Plus, the damage from the healers. So
I mean, you did mention it doesn't have a lot of burst, but Sinful Brand is a very passive and consistent. However boring it is, it's a very passive, consistent and efficient way to deal damage that you can maintain as well with the playstyle that Havoc has. So it's very hard to not do well with Havoc, which has been kind of a consistent theme with how the spec performs in Mythic Plus. Its toolkit definitely seems to be made for Mythic Plus with the way that his defensives works. You have darkness, you have blur, you have magic damage reduction, you have sustain for yourself. So you're very less reliant on healers than everything else. And like Marcelian said, it buffs a lot of the casters, which if you're going to run a melee and you're not going to run the usual suspects, then Havoc is probably your next best to actually buff the range DPS, which you will have, and those range DPS are very likely going to be either a warlock or a mage or both.
Oh, for sure. Now, the big surprise, well, not really that big, but we have to make a disclaimer for this. So Outlaw Rogue. Okay, now 2 months ago when we made our last M+ tier list for melees, Outlaw was just receiving its buff, so we didn't really catch any logs or performances during that week in order to see how much that would impact the spec. Now, with that being said, the buffs were kind of pog in the sense that you had buffs to Between the Eyes, to Pistol Shot, to Sinister Strike, to the cleave thing. Blade Flurry, yes. Thank you. So it's been buffed all across the board, and surprise, I mean, Outlaw was always the sweetheart of Mythic Plus melees, and right now, after like 2 months, it's in A tier, man. And this is a big ass jump because last time it was the only spec in D tier. It was so bad at the time that a lot of people would just actually prefer to play even Assassination. Not to mention sub always for the last 2 seasons always being on the top, right? Outlaw, super many buttons, super piano playstyle over there. You have to have big muscle memory in order to get it right. but it does perform right now super good. I mean, with the buffs, you would always expect a spec like Outlaw to deliver great single target damage as well as great AoE and cleave, because the rotation doesn't really change. You just pop in that Blade Flurry over there and you're good to go.
Oh yeah, 100%. Outlaw is taking its place back, and listen, if you're a rogue player, maybe this is one of the best times to be a rogue player, since you actually have options. And even though Assassination is kind of suffering a little bit, Outlaw, and we'll see sub exactly where it is, likely still gonna be good, is looking pretty good. And I'm seeing more and more top rogues play more Outlaw with each passing week. So I don't know if it's better than sub, but right now it's competing.
Yeah. Okay. Next on the list we have the Retribution Paladin, which, surprise, surprise, since 2 months ago it has bumped a tier. It was initially, I believe, in C tier, and now
it was behind Feral, and now it's actually doing really well ahead Feral. I was actually surprised to see Red pumping the way it does.
I can see why, because at the end of the day, when you're gonna put a Red and a Feral in front of like big back spread, is always going to come out on top. Granted, at the sacrifice of some single target prowess, and yes, you can see, like, this is the thing, right? Some of these tier lists are very, very skewed by the actual affixes you will have in that week. Even so, if you're going to have a Red Paladin that is built more or less for super single target, it can do very, very good. Not as much as last season, but still very, very good. Now, you can have the argument for Feral being, bursty AoE, but that's a one-time wonder. Red Paladin has,
that's fucking consistent,
it's for a long
man.
time, right, when it does it.
You know what I think happened, man? I think the Reds actually got their gavel now.
Yeah, that's also a big factor. Yes, it's also a big factor. It really bumped up the spec. So all the doomsayers that was saying, Red is shit and trash in Mythic Plus. No, it's not. It's doing really, really good, and it's also fun. And I'm biased as fuck as I play one. But hey,
you're not biased at all, man. I played my Reds, and I was always having like some issues with Red, but right now Red is so fucking hilarious and fun and stupid. We actually made a meme on stream with the proc party where you just like rock techno and EDM whenever. Because there's so many procs, man. It's so good. Reminds me of WoD Red.
Reminiscent of Warlords of General Red for sure, but I would say a little bit more better than that in some capacity.
It makes sense now.
Yeah, so happy times for Red Paladins in the B tier, looking at the big case, 27s, 28s, all that good shit. Next, subtlety,
some Rogue. More good shit.
More good shit. Well, yes, this is the thing, right? So placing sub was interesting because, as we mentioned earlier about Outlaw, right? I do believe that some of the population that was playing sub actually switched to Outlaw after the buffs, but it wasn't enough to like get behind it. So it's still in front of Outlaw, but very close. Like, but
we do have to mention that last time it was S tier contending with Windwalkers in survival, and now it's behind Havoc. That's fine. I mean, listen, obviously we're on the cusp of season 4, and specs like survival and Destroy Warlocks are very subject to get nerfs. We don't know exactly what the next specs after those will get nerfs, but seeing as sub right now is maintaining a more decent position, it's likely that sub is not going to be on the visor of the devs to get any kind of nerf. So if you are playing a rogue right now, god damn it, man, you have two of
I think
they're kind of polar opposite in terms of like fun and engagement, but I think that just covers a big spectrum of what you would like to enjoy when you play a rogue in Mythic Plus.
It's a matter of taste at the end of the day, and I mean, you won't see as many sub-rogues again because a lot of them switch to Outlaw, and this is one of the other reasons why it isn't S tier anymore. The population just kind of dropped a little bit on sub-rogues. That being said, something that hasn't dropped and it has retained the position of Supreme King, Year of the Spear, all of that,
still going strong. This might be the last time that we see survival in S tier. We don't know exactly how it's going to approach season 4. We'll have to see. But until then, survival is still rocking it hard in S tier. The way that the spec scales, it's amazing. And even prior to this season, which kind of goes to show how good survival has been designed for AoE, survival was doing massive AoE damage. It was just outscaled by the fact that it has all very, very weak single target. And obviously, prior to this season, prior to 9.2, rather, marksmanship was doing way better and you had way better melees altogether. But with the advent of the tier set and the explosion of the bombs, what bombs? That bomb, that bomb, that bomb, all of the bombs, man.
Spec, yeah.
Jesus, it's a little bit degenerate, but hey, survival hasn't been at the top of anything in the last couple of years, so
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the folks that actually enjoy the so-called melee transformation of survival will actually love this. Granted, you know, as Flame mentioned, it is a little bit degenerate, but it gets the job done. There's like no spec that can compete with what it does at this point, right?
In melee.
Sure, in melee, yeah. Survival, for me personally, seeing the playstyle and what it relies on, I'm not really that happy about it. I used to love playing survival back in BFA and Legion and stuff. It was a little bit different. It had a little bit more intricacy in it. And I do believe, you know, there's still chance for that. But that being said, that's really not important. Who wants to push like super high keys? We're talking like 30s and above. Then you take survival and you do
Just take survival, it's fine. You're getting bloodlust, it's all good.
Okay. Okay. Sad story next. We have Unholy Death Knights.
Damn.
What a
Unholy is not having a good time. It's last time it was C tier, kind of middle of the pack, but everybody else seems to have been performing way better than Unholy, and right now Unholy is right smack dab in the bottom. Listen, I'm sorry, Biceps. It is what it is. These are analytics, man. Yeah. But Unholy is not a bad spec, you guys. The problem with Unholy is not really the problem with Unholy, is the problem with the tier set, because the tier sets, we've talked about this before, provide a major power to players, and that power level, the level of the power that tier sets provide scales on like a spectrum for each spec, and Unholy is the sad recipient of the bottom end of that spectrum, where the power that the tier set gives Unholy is very minimal, as opposed to somebody like Survival, which is explosive. This is basically how the tier sets are being designed. It's a symptom of how Shadowlands systems are, because there's just too many of them to get them all right. However, that aside, Unholy is a blast to play. The playstyle is nice. There's always something to do. Cooldowns match together, and you can still blast. Man, I'm doing like massive damage with Unholy in 20 keys, and obviously the top Unholies are doing way higher than 20 keys, so you can definitely have a lot of fun, and you can rest assured and reconcile with the fact that Unholy is not really that reliant on all of this external system power. So the spec kind of works on its own. It's complemented by the external powers, not as much as, you know, specs like Survival, Sub, and Windwalker and stuff like that, but Unholy does work with its own engine, and maybe that can be a consolation prize, because it's still a fun spec to play.
It's still, and once again, guys, just as a disclaimer, we know, like, if you're gonna main any of these specs, regardless of their tier, right, you have to remember, when we're making these tier lists, these rankings, we are mostly basing these on the highest number of keys these specs are doing. Sure, we look at like Warcraft logs and see how they're like kind of ranked over there. We also look at subcreation and stuff, but we kind of try to make a mix out of all of this with a huge emphasis on the highest number of keys. So this is kind of the rankings, and Unholy can still push more than 20s, no problemo. So that just goes to show the ranking is being like at the top of the top of the top.
Yeah, it's basically the 1%. So obviously it goes without saying, as always, you know, whatever you like to play, just play it, and you'll have plenty of fun.
Yeah, have fun with it. Okay, last on the list we have
the Windwalkers.
Monks, no surprise, retained their position.
Still kings.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, you know, the king's hand, I would say, because the king is survival, you know, which is
the right hand
of the king. I mean, Windwalker monks have been consistent on top of the melee Mythic Plus tier list for quite a while now.
Quite a bit, yeah.
Which I would say we're still happy for them. We've seen the performances of Windwalkers, you know, starting off from BFA and moving slowly to Shadowlands. They weren't always that great. Now, you can have an argument on the fact that, sure, it's another like super linear playstyle that you have to take into account when you're playing Windwalker, but as survival, it gets the job done. Not everybody's happy with how you play it in AoE or wherever. There's still people complaining about single target damage. I think to some extent it's fine. To some other extent, it can still have some.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot really have them all. And sure, I know that there are a lot of people that are complaining about the Danza Chiji procs, which is something that you have to be aware of, since that's where most of your damage will come through. However, once stars aligned, things explode, and you are a happy little monk.
Yeah, I mean, I would say well deserved. It's not the easiest spec to pull off once again, but I think like for
very rewarding,
very rewarding if you pull it off. Not to mention, all the utility it comes along with. Okay, so you're gonna be, if you're gonna have like 2 melees in there, even if you have like a tank, it will still benefit from
Mystic Touch.
Mystic Touch, the melee buff, and things like Wing Cap and Ring of Peace.
Oh yeah, let's not forget all that lovely monk utility.
It's there, but let's be real. They're there because of their damage. Okay, so this is the.
I mean, sure, you can blast, but hey, listen, you're one of the few classes that can dispel shit in Plaguefall, so rejoice.
Yes, but this is like the final image of, I would say, like I think this is the last tier list for this season.
Likely,
I don't think we're gonna catch any other new ones, so we're gonna move along probably next week or in 2 weeks to season 4. But this is how it currently looks. Now, one thing that will be interesting for the future is we're gonna take this as the last image of Melees in M+ and compare it to, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks into the new season, because then I'm curious to see how these specs are gonna be skewed.
It's gonna be whack. I know for tanks the dungeon pool is gonna change. Who is the best? Likely pro is gonna be king. So I don't know how that's gonna affect the damage. And obviously, we know that shit is gonna be nerfed. We don't know everything that's gonna be nerfed, and people are still on edge because Blizzard hasn't said anything about season 4 yet. I don't know if they're like hands-on with everything Dragonflight Alpha, but
there's tuning and changes and updates to the specs, but there's also the skew that can come from items. Okay, so you're gonna have items from the faded raids, like all trinkets and weapons and all of that.
Sylvanas daggers,
plus some again. Plus some some things from the dungeons, Karazhan and whatnot. So it's gonna be interesting to compare what we have now to what is to come.
Sure.
But that being said, this is the image. We want to thank the patrons once again for being super awesome and consistently supporting what we do around here. I don't think you've noticed, but we're kind of like pumping videos every day now. Just getting that Dragonflight Alpha love to you guys. And what better content to do than class reviews and testing and all of that, because it's kind of our jam. We love to do it. We love classes. Okay, we love all that.
100%, and that wouldn't have been possible without your support as well, going into making all of this so cool, so amazing, and being able to do this daily is a thing that we're actually pretty happy about. So if you do like our content and you want to support us a little bit more, dear viewer, as well, you can check the link down below. Go to our Patreon page, see what it's all about. Maybe you don't know what's good, what are you gonna find there? Maybe something that you like.
Thank you, patrons, and thank you for watching the video.
Thank you.
Have the greatest weekend in your life.
The best one.
Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.